piping can add another element of finesse to your quilts. This quilt is just the plain binding. It has a number of different colors because I decided to use strips of the various colors that were in the quilt to finish it off. This quilt is a flange, and a flange is just a flat piece of fabric. But even still, it has, because of that flange, it does add an extra element of finishing to this quilt, and particularly because I've used one of the colors from the quilt, so it really sets it off. Piping is a flange that has a cord in it. And with this one, you can see that because of the cord, there's an extra element of depth and added finesse to this quilt edge because of the piping compared to the flat piece of fabric for the flange. Okay, the easiest way to deal with the piping is this wonderful little piping foot. And what's interesting about it, it has a very distinct groove which fits over the cord as it's going down. And if you don't have a piping foot, you can use your zipper foot. But when you're using your zipper foot, you will want to very carefully reposition your needle so that it is stitching right against the cord. And if you have an IDF on either machine, either Husqvarna or Pfaff, turn that off, because this is a regular foot is not an IDF foot, which has the big gap at the back. So my machine is probably going to beep at me because it wants the IDF turned on, but we don't want it on. So I'm just going to start stitching. And you can see that you can see the position of the needle. That it is stitching right against that cord. So I'm just going to keep sliding the cord into place and let the foot and the machine do the work. This is a drapery cord, and you can buy it any place, and I just have to find it online because I didn't feel like going shopping. To calculate the amount of piping that you need, obviously it's going to be one length for each of the sides and one length for each of the ends, which is the same manner that you're going to that you normally calculate your binding. This kit, Piping Hot Binding, is an interesting kit. It came with some of the cord, which actually you can buy anywhere because it's just it's actually a drapery cord. But what came with this kit is this ruler. And now this ruler is actually makes life a lot easier dealing with piping because it has two grooves, one for 1/4 inch piping and one for 1/2 inch piping. All of Hoop Sisters quilts seem to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to trim this down to 1/4 inch. And the width of the strip that I cut was 1 inch, which gives me more than adequate fabric to do my cord. And then using this ruler, I have got a beautiful and very precise 1/4 inch seam that is going to make life easier for me when I go to attach the piping to my quilt. Likewise, if I was doing a 1/2 inch, I was going to use the 1/2 inch side. And if you're going to do a traditional quilt, you normally will have a 1/2 inch seam, and there's your 1/2 inch seam allowance. To put the piping onto the quilt, I'm still going to use my piping foot, but I don't want the cord to be in that seam allowance or even in the area where I'm going to be stitching my seam. So I'm just going to put a little bit of a mark there. And I'm going to open this up and peel back my stitching a little bit, because I'm going to clip the cord there so I don't have the the bulk of the cord in my seam. Oh, not quite enough. It's almost like peeling a banana. Okay. Because I've got my 1/4 inch seam allowance is already established because I had it trimmed, there's where my cord is going, so now I'm just going to stitch this down. And I really don't have to worry about much except aligning the edge of my sashing, or the edge of the piping fabric, with the quilt. And unfortunately, you do have to stitch the piping down on the entire quilt before you go to put on your binding. And coming to the end, again, this is where my seam is going to be, so I'm going to trim that back. But first of all, I can cut this. And again, I'm going to peel this back. And I can put a mark there so it's easier to see how far I have to go to get this cord out there. And stitch off the end. Now to turn the corner, likewise, I'm at the same position here where I don't want my cord to be in there. However, I do want it to fill up that little gap. So I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to trim it not right in the seam, but just a little bit past it, so that I've got some of the bulk in there rather than just having a flat empty piece of, then it becomes flange without the cord in it. So I'm going to trim that back. I can put a little mark on here so I know how far to go. Now I have that dealt with, and now I can position this exactly where I want it and sew that down. And now I'm going to put on my binding. And my seam is already established, so I just have, and I'm still using the same foot, because you can see that there's still enough of a ridge there that it's going to follow along, and it still is stitching right against the cording. And here is the piping with the binding on it.